All the earth will shout your praise, our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. Yes, all the earth will shout your praise, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your word in our lives, so we do our praise, our praise, our lives, we pour our praise to you. It's your word in our lives, so we pour our praise, pour our praise. You will worship. I will give you all my praise. You alone I want to worship. You alone I praise you. Love my spirit, you are the spirit. I will give you all my worship. I will give you all my praise. You alone I want to worship. You alone are worthy of my praise. I will bow down. I will bow down. Hear you ask me. Hear you ask me. I will serve you. I will serve you. Give you everything. Give you everything. I will lift up. I will lift up my eyes to your throne. My eyes to your throne. I will trust you. I will trust you. Trust you, Lord. You are my praise. You are my Lord. I will worship. I will worship. I will praise you. I will praise you. From my strength, all my strength. I will seek you. I will seek you. All of my days, all of my days. I will follow. I will follow. will lift up my eyes to your throne, eyes to your throne. I will trust you, I will trust you, Lord. You are my words, you are my worship. I will give you are worthy of my praise.
You are worthy. Lord, I pray. You're there. You're there. Strengthening me and the worship. You are the creator.
Well, let's pray and then we'll get into our text today. Lord, we thank you for your word. We're just grateful that it's recorded the ways your people have related to you, the ways they've known you. It says that, so we just pray that you would instruct our hearts today, that we could. So I'm going to do something. What'll be different is I'm going to go through a booklet that I wrote. I think it was in 2013. Letha, I'm using notes. So that would be different. Online, on your own. But I asked Jerry to post a link to it on our Facebook feed. So it's up there on your own. And just to set the stage a little bit, and you know that Moses led them out of there, and then he led them in the land that God had given them. Way back, going in 400 years later, there's Joshua and the people walking behind him and settling the land. And after Joshua, of Israel would follow, whatever kind of trouble you could get into back then in the desert. And then God would send a judge, or would lead. When they went into idolatry, they also got conquered by their enemies. So there's a period of the Judges, and there's the book of Judges covers a lot of that. My gosh, and we can't put it all on the Israelites. You really see the extent of our own faithlessness and depravity. Some ways. So First Samuel it starts during the period of the Judges. When they would bring sacrifices and worship and things like that, they would bring it to the temple. We've looked at it before, but God's glory was there, and they would show the permanent structure that would be built would be in Jerusalem, but they're in Shiloh, and that's where people went to worship. Hannah and Peninnah, and that's not to be confused with the same. So through the first couple chapters into chapter 3 a little bit, but I'm not going to. Year after year, faithfully to worship at the tabernacle, and seem to be faithful people of the Lord. And one barren. Cam's been talking to us about firsts and seconds. And remember, Hagar could have kids, and Sarah was barren. And remember what condemned her, and that was kind of a big deal for a woman to be able to do that. And it's a point of pride. And we look at verse 6 in chapter 1 of 1 Samuel. Talking about Hannah and Peninnah, it says, her rival. Now that's no reflection on Hannah. This is not something that's wrong with her per se. The Lord, you can just imagine that Peninnah. The interesting thing though is that when they would go up to of the times, the heir was the one that got the double portion of the inheritance over there. And he's favoring her and loves her with his whole heart and is making that really clear. And he fed Peninnah and her kids too, so don't worry about that. But he just gave the double portion to Hannah. So again, they would come up every year to do this and sacrifice to the Lord. In the first chapter, what we find is that this rivalry between Peninnah and Hannah has probably been going on for years, and Hannah has just got all this stuff built up. She's got years of being mistreated by Peninnah and years of grief. I mean, just take a minute to appreciate that. Just the depth of her grief and not being able to have children. I don't know if anybody has experienced that here or not, but if you have, you can really relate to where Hannah's at. But we've all gone, things didn't turn out, or we weren't able to produce it. All of this is just pent up and built up for her over a year. And it says that she's praying silently and her lips are moving. And then Eli comes up and in this hard place, and he comes up and says, "Why are you drunk? Put your wine away." Good grief. So when it rains, it pours. So Hannah, she says, "Well, okay, wait a minute. I'm pouring out my heart to the Lord because I'm heartbroken. Don't think of me as a wicked woman." And she says this to Eli. Eli, to his credit, he backs off and says, "Oh, well, may the Lord grant your request." So the Lord does hear her prayer, and I think he worked through Eli there, right? He honored me a son. I will give him to you. He will serve you all the days of his life. Pick it up the story in chapter 2. Into chapter 1, I guess. But it's a year later, and it says he's been. So we're not sure exactly how much time has passed, but Samuel's been mean that she brings him back to the tabernacle, and she's going to give him to God. And, okay, moms, can you just imagine with me here for a minute? You've waited all your life to have a child, and you finally have him, and after a couple of years, you're going to go take him to the church and drop him off and leave. Crazy. It's really crazy. So that's what she does. She takes Samuel up there, she presents him to the Lord and to Eli and leaves him there to serve the Lord and belong to the Lord all his days. I do want to look at Hannah's prayer in chapter 2. This is probably the heart of what I want to get to. Because she gives Samuel to the Lord and then she prays this prayer, and it's really striking. So I'm going to read that, chapter 2, verse 1. Hannah prayed, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is lifted up by the Lord. My mouth boasts over my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one this arrogant. The bows of the warriors are broken, but the feeble are clothed with strength. Food, but those who are starving hunger no more. The Lord brings death and gives life. He sends sun to rest and lifts the needy from the garbage pile. He seats them with nobleness, but the wicked perish in darkness. For a man does not prevail by his own strength. The Lord will judge." Okay, this is an awesome prayer, and praying this out of gratitude, obviously, because God has given her this child. But there's a lot more to this, and one of the clues to that is the very last thing she says. He will give power to his king. He will lift up the horn of his anointed. That changes, well, not just that, but that's one of the phrases that changes the whole prayer, because for Hannah, this is more than her getting a son or God answering her prayer. This is all set in the context of God giving power to his king and lifting up the horn of his anointed. And Cam's talked about before that anointed, that's the same word as Christ. That's the word Messiah in Hebrew. And so that throws a whole new light on other things in her prayer. And I'm going to focus on 5, 6, 7. The Lord brings death and gives life, but those who are slain with many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and gives life. He sends some to Sheol, and he raises others up. The Lord brings poverty and gives wealth. He humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the needy from the garbage pile. He seats them with noblemen and gives them a throne of honor. Okay, so she's praying about her having been barren, and she compares her barrenness to hunger, to death, to poverty, to need, those types of pictures. And I wanted to jump over really quick to 1 Corinthians 15, because Paul talked in some of these same ways as far as knowing Jesus. And I think this is another key thing about Hannah's prayer, is that, again, she's not just praying out of gratitude because God gave her a son. So she was barren because the Lord made her barren. That God ordained that season in her life, and he did it. I think there are lots of something spiritual is happening, and God wants us to have eyes to see what's spiritually going on in our life by what we think about the world. Our own minds are a veil, honestly, to spiritual